Welcome to Al Bernstein Unplugged Unboxing. In a 40-year Hall of Fame career, Al has chronicled some of the greatest moments in boxing history. On this podcast, you get to hear him expand on those memories and talk about the current news in the sport of boxing. You also hear Al interview some of the biggest names in the sport. Here's Al Bernstein Unplugged.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. We're glad you joined us for another edition. And on this one, I think we've got a real treat for you. Jerry Izenberg, who is a Hall of Fame writer. He is, in fact, in 16 Hall of Fame, so he's ahead of me. I know I've been a couple, but I hit double digits last year, but he's in 16, so that's pretty impressive, including the International Boxing Hall of Fame. And the reason we're talking to Jerry is that his book, Once There Were Giants, which is about the great heavyweights from 1962 to 1997, is being re-released. And it's already available for pre-sale now on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com, and then it will go on full sale on April 27th. And it's being re-released because of the 50th anniversary of the first Ali Frazier fight, which was held 50 years ago on March 8th. And so this book, which is a delightful book, gave us a good chance to talk to Jerry, and you're going to see that interview on this show. And I am going to endeavor to answer your questions that you send to me on Twitter, @AlBernstein, and we love that you send them. And to help me do that and other things, we have my co-host, Trip Mitchell. Hi, Trip. How are you?
I am doing great, and a great weekend of fights last weekend, and the Oscar Valdez big upset over Burchelt, and that will lead to our first question about the 130-pound division, because that really is becoming a great division in boxing. And Maestro, self-proclaimed, asked, has 130 made an argument recently for being the most exciting division in boxing?
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, I don't know if I'm ready to anoint it the most exciting in boxing. However, it's really good. And it's one of all the divisions from about, the lighter weight divisions in boxing, I think are absolutely terrific right now. I'm not being a cheerleader. I'm just stating a fact, I think. And this 130-pound division is a perfect example. To wit, last week's fight with Oscar Valdez jumping up from featherweight and upsetting Miguel Burchelt. It was one of the best performances I think I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years by any boxer. Oscar Valdez boxed beautifully, a style that he is not necessarily known for, but has worked on with Eddie Reynoso. And he also showed great power in knocking out Burchelt, a knockout that it made us worry about Miguel Burchelt for a little while, and hopefully he's doing much better now. But that division also, we saw a week before that, Shavkat Rakhimov fighting Jojo Diaz in a draw in what was a very entertaining fight. Diaz lost his title on the scales, which adds some more drama to the division. And we know that Carl Frampton is going to be challenging Jamel Herring for his title very soon. That fight got rescheduled. And then you have, still Gervonta Davis, who has a title at 130 and can fight at that division. We don't know where he's going to fight next. He's, of course, a very big star in the sport of boxing. And then you have Shakur Stevenson, who may be a budding superstar, who's in that very same division. And finally, Chris Colbert, who was very impressive in his last outing. I had the pleasure of announcing that fight. And he is a fighter to watch. So when you put all that together and add a few other ingredients in that division, it's really special.
Well, that's great. And I know you had a good weekend, and we've got a great guest for this week's show. Let's ask another question. Jay on Boxing said, what are the handful of things you look at when judging a fight? How does it differ while on air and when watching at home or in the crowd?
Yeah, first to deal with the part whether it differs, if you're in the crowd, of course you can't. I watch it on the monitor when I'm announcing the fight, so I'm more attuned to that part of it. I think you can see the same fight. I actually personally think watching it on the TV version is better because you see everything closer and you can see them more readily. So though the judges are right at ringside and, they have about as good a view as you can have, My view on scoring of a boxing match, and certainly we've had more than our share of controversies. Our fight last week, some people felt that the scoring in Adrian Broner in his fight was too wide a margin. If you thought Broner won, it would be by a smaller margin. Many critical of that. Giovanni Santiago making it what I thought was a very close fight. But so that was an example, one of many in recent time, which it's generated a little controversy. Now, I think scoring of a fight comes down to one important thing, and one thing only: punches landed. I know there's a portion of the rule book that says ring generalship. I actually think that's irrelevant. In every other sport, we don't care how you got to the result. We don't care if a home run was windblown. We don't care if a touchdown pass was tipped by a defender. It's still, that touchdown still is worth 6 points. That homer is still worth 1 run plus whoever is on base. In boxing, landing punches is the ultimate goal. So I think how many punches you landed and or how well they were landed is all that should instruct judges on how they score a round. And so for me, it comes down to that. And I think you have to have that tabulation in your head to know who's landing more punches and which is more effective. And the other thing, of course, is knockdowns. The knockdown will obviously benefit, as it should, the fighter that scores a knockdown. So to me, scoring is a simple, not easy, but simple. It purely equates to that. And I'm not saying that you take the CompuBox numbers and use those to score the fight. I'm not saying that. Those numbers are a guideline. It's what's in your head as a judge. What do I see? And I made this suggestion once a long time ago, and I could stick with it. I personally think, for a while in amateur boxing, I tried scoring by numbers with people punching it. I think each judge should have one big giant, button over here, a big button over here. One is for one fighter, one is for the other, and they can touch that button as they want. Hit the button to print a printout at the end of the round and look at it just for their own guidance, to remind them what they were thinking during the round. They don't even have to go by that printout, but it will remind them who they thought was landing more punches. I think even something like that is beneficial. So I'm sure that I'll get all kinds of tweets and discussions about that for sure. Well, one man who has had plenty of discussion about the sport of boxing, good, bad, and indifferent, is the great Jerry Izenberg. Jerry has written 13 books. He has attended every Super Bowl and covered it, save this last one, and he is just one of the best sports writers that has ever practiced the craft. And his book, Once There Were Giants, which chronicles the heavyweight division and does so in such a excellent fashion, as I mentioned, is being re-released now. And we had a nice long conversation with Jerry Izenberg in which he told, I think, some amazing stories. Here's that chat. Jerry, you have written a book that, in my opinion, kind of really tells the story completely of the heavyweight giants that roamed the land from 1962 to 1997. And what was it that prompted you to say, I'm going to take this era and I'm going to chronicle it and try and do justice to all these great men?
Well, I've written a lot of books, as you know, 15 or 16, but it seems that anybody who used a urinal at a public train station and he happened to be standing next to Ali wrote a book about Ali. and Ali was my friend for 50 years. Right. And these other guys are my friends too, but Ali was my close friend for 50 years. In fact, one night I said to my wife, he's one of my 5 best friends in the world. And she said, yeah, who are the other 4? So actually, I just get tired of reading all the misinformation and crap. And then somebody else comes out and steals something from that. Then they got more crap and more misinformation. I wanted to tell it the way it was, and I thought, but geez, his accomplishments don't mean a lot unless you point out who were the other people.
Right.
Who were the other people, the challengers, the people who never got to fight, whatever else. And then what about the heavyweight crown? I got to thinking, there's an anecdote. It's very close to my heart. The late Lou Duva and I are standing in the tunnel at Madison Square Garden. It's before a title fight. It was not a heavyweight title, but a title fight. And the guy is standing, the fighter's there, and Lou says, let's go, we gotta go, we gotta go. And the fighter says, I ain't going nowhere, that ain't my music. And Duva says to me, have you ever heard such shit? Can you imagine Joe Louis standing here and saying, I'm not going anywhere till they play my music? Said, that's what happened everywhere with the smoke and the magic and the posing and everything else. All I know is when I was a young writer, when I was a really young writer, the most exciting moment there are a couple. One was they're off at the Kentucky Derby. That everything in your body is focused to it. And the other is you finish the Star Spangled Banner at a World Series, and there it is in the same winter playoffs. But there was nothing at all except being there with the atmosphere, the most electric atmosphere in the world. They start the long walk to the ring. You don't see them. You hear a murmur from the back of the building, and a murmur becomes a sound, and the sound becomes louder. And then the second lifts up the ropes, the guy's in the ring. It is the most electric moment. And at that moment, you can always make a case for the guy in the other corner. It doesn't matter before they ring that bell. You say, yeah, but he's got a pretty good left hand. Maybe, that's all happening through my head when I'm sitting at ringside. And now, only thing is sitting at the ringside is, when are they going to start this damn thing? Turn off the smoke machine. Jesus Christ.
It has changed, that's for sure.
That's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, well, that's a good explanation of it. You in the book you talk about, and it's a great chronology of the many men and matchups that happened in the heavyweight division during that time, and you deal with a lot of different boxing matches, and we're going to talk about some of them, and a lot of different men. But because this is the 50th anniversary from March 8th, 1971, of the first Ali Frazier fight, and that's part of the reason why your book's being re-released, we're going to delve into that one a little bit more even. And of course, it was an extraordinary event. Everything about it, even starting from the two promoters at the beginning, Jerry Perenchio and Jack Kent Cooke, kind of an unlikely duo, putting this fight together. Just putting this fight together was a story in and of itself, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Ali wanted this fight desperately. And the television people wanted this fight for one. They thought Ali was going to the can, that he was going to jail. They'd never get the fight in. And then we start to try to Ali's got to get a license in order to have the fight. Every time he goes to a town, they say, that's pretty good for the town. Then in comes the Veterans of Foreign Wars, American. We can't have the fight here. The last serious attempt before they finally got a place and a license, they go to Chandler, Arizona. There's an Indian reservation not far. Zora Fali, who was the last, what poetic justice, the last guy to fight Ali, come back against him, right? The Indians say, it's not fair. What are you going to do for us if we let you do? Because they're a separate nation.
Right.
I don't know the name of the tribe. So they say, look, we're going to build you a little Tinker Toy stadium with 25,000 seats. You keep all the admissions. And we're going to give you an outlet for the movie theaters, one outlet. And the council talks it over and they say, pretty good. Here's the peace pipe. Let's go do it. Ali leaves the reservation and the phone rings in the tribal council. And the guy from a ribbon clerk, which is what I call these people, it was a ribbon clerk conspiracy against them. They're all middle echelon people. A guy calls and he says to the chief, you like that HCW money that's coming your way? I would suggest you don't have this fight. Fight canceled. Now, Ali goes to Atlanta, and Lester Maddox, a character all by himself that, thank God, we don't have we
Governor of Georgia.
Got more of them now. But anyway, Lester has got axe handles in his barbecue joint in a barrel, and he's got a sign: "Feel free if the whatever I don't want to use the word, but if the I hate to say N word, it's so trite,
Right.
but anyway, if they come in here, take the axe handles and chase them out." Well, he decides to run for president, and I'm the only guy to interview him, other than the people from Georgia. I go over there and I'm listening to him, and he's spouting and all that, and I say, okay, so my lead the next day is, if Lester Maddox has a battle flag, it'll be crossed axe handles, rampant on a sea of A1 barbecue sauce. Well, that didn't go over too well, but Lester remembered me because I'd written it. Now he goes to Atlanta. Lester says no fight after he's pressured. A guy by the name of Johnson, Afro-American guy who's a state senator in Atlanta, is smarter than everybody in the state because he realized there's no boxing commission in Georgia. None. He creates the Atlanta City Boxing Commission. Come on down. The water's fine. Ali's got to fight. Quarry, sure, I'll fight him. All right. Now, the day before the fight, I'm working for a.
Yeah, this is fight with Jerry Quarry Lee before the Ali Frazier fight. Right.
This is the comeback fight. All right. Now I'm sitting with him in a broken down gym. I don't know why they put us there. We're sitting on a bench that has 3 legs. And Ali reaches over. I can hear the shower leaking behind us. And Ali reaches over and he pats my head and he says, when I first met you, you had hair. And I turn around and tap him in his stomach and say, yeah, when I first met you, you weren't carrying around that spare tire. So he really wasn't in shape for this fight. All right, you're going to have the fight. I go to Lester because I've got a show on public television, and I'm going to interview Lester about why he's turned against the fight. And he said, well, I don't know about you. I said, listen, I'll give you my word of honor on Jefferson Davis's grave if I have to. I'll give you a minute. If you don't curse, you got the minute. Whatever you said, it's on the show. So now I remember, but Lester leans back in a chair. There's a little statuette of praying hands on one side and a Confederate cannon on the other, and a little tiny flag. And he says, I think it is a sad and tragic day when a man who will not fight for his own country will get in the ring and fight for dollars. I therefore have proclaimed tomorrow night a night of mourning in the state of Georgia. Jesse Outlaw, a local sports editor, said to me, Lester wants to mourn, let him go mourn. I'm going to the fight. Well, they go to the fight, and I'll tell you, it was like turning back. Ali did this a couple of times. In brief episodes, he could create the old Ali. And it couldn't last because he was not the old Ali anymore. He comes out, bang, left hand, right cross. I mean, he's got Quarry in trouble. Quarry fights back. Everybody forgets Quarry was a pretty good damn fighter. Well, the bell rings to end the round. Ali has won that round by a mile. And I look at him walking back to his corner, and I said, that's not him. That's a beached whale. He's puffing so hard with his mouth open. I'm hoping he can make it to the corner. He sits down. 2 rounds later, Quarry gets the cut. They stop the fight. He's over the first obstacle, right? Then he beats Bonavina. And to me, I don't pay much attention to judges' scorecards. Not because they're corrupt, or though some are, but not because they're corrupt, because many times they don't know what they're seeing. In fact, you hit a guy with a body punch, they don't even score it because they can't see the punch. So anyway, he fights Bonavina, and in my scorecard, he's 1 point. But he's got to win it. He's got to win the last 2 rounds. He hits Bonavina with the best left hook he ever threw in his entire life. I thought the gloves were loaded. I mean, Ali doesn't knock people out in the 14th round unless they faint by attrition, right? Bang. So now he's got to fight. Well, meanwhile, leading up to that, Ali is campaigning to get this fight. Before he even fought Quarry, he's on a street outside of the old Clover Lane gym, of course, from the train station in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia. And he's pounding on the window, come out here. I'm going to fight you right now. I'll fight you in the street. And Joe is Joe. I love Joe. He says, you want to fight? We'll fight. He starts for the door. Yank Durham grabs him by the neck. And he says, you ain't going anywhere. You think you're going to have this fight for no money? You're not getting by me. So, of course, there was no street fight. Ali loved those fake street fights anyway. So now, like, they finally make the fight. Now you got to remember, they make the fight. They're scared to death because they think Ali's going to jail, and we got to get this fight in. Well, what he had to do to get that fight, he'd been away close to 3 years. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, and all week long, you're getting the same thing back and forth. But meanwhile, um, he turned Ali into an Uncle Tom or a white fighter, depending upon which
You mean
audience.
turn Frazier into that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. He turned,
Yeah.
he turned Frazier into it, right? And Frazier livid, you know. And
Yeah.
Frazier's talking to me that week, and he says, "Oh, the poor guy. He didn't learn to fight till somebody stole his bike when he was 15. You know, bike. When I was 15, I didn't have a bike. I'm in the field plowing, getting ready to get married. Seeing a guy get whipped in front of me by the straw boss, and I got to go up north because of that. Because my mama says, get out of town because you saw it." He goes to his, and he's recounting all this at this time. He goes to his aunt's apartment in New York. He said, "I'm working in a slaughterhouse. He's taking boxing lessons in the PAL gym, and I'm hitting cows between the eye with a baseball bat." He said, "I don't want to hear about his deprivation. I just want to get him in the ring." And Ali was Ali. He always played the role, no matter whatever they wanted him to be. He would be the opposite, so they get them inflamed. Well, about 4 or 5 months before this fight, everybody says, "Was America divided?" Was America divided? 4 or 5 months before this fight, hippies and hard hats were in a fight with pipes and fists in Times Square, New York. You bet this country was. I hadn't seen anything like this since I was a little kid, and my father drove me by the two German American Bund camps to see the kids in uniform marching and say, "We got to watch out for these people." That's how bad the country was divided. And I'm told, and they're like, I'm looking forward to the fight very much because I want to see the fight. I mean, and to me, if they fight maybe a year, 2 years, if they fight 2 years earlier, Ali probably wins because he's getting to the top of his game at that point. Everything else was descending after that. And the thing about these two guys, they always made each other better.
Right.
Whereas in the case of the second fight, they made each other worse.
Yeah.
If you sat through the second fight, you'd say, "What are these guys' names? I'm getting out of here." It's a terrible fight.
That wasn't a great
First,
fight.
the first fight was really the audience, the emotion, the noise. My father-in-law dies the night before the fight. I can't go to the fight. I get a tape. I see it 4 or 5 times. Now I know it happened in a fight. Joe Frazier goes to the hospital. Ali then starts his campaign on every talk show. Well, look, Joe Frazier, he's in the hospital. Look at me. Look at the pretty face. Look at this. Look at that. So, okay, when that happens, um, Frazier's doing a burn. So I think, there's only one place to get the real story. I missed the fight, but this is the real story. I'm going to Philly to the gym, and I'm going to sit Frazier down and say, what happened during the fight and what's happening now? I get off the train, North Philly. I walk across the street, walk in the gym. There is, so help me, a floor to ceiling photograph of Ali on his ass and Frazier looking over his shoulder going to the corner. And I said, "You didn't waste any time, did you?" He said, "I can't afford to. You know what's happening?" He said, "Listen, we're going to go get some sandwiches and we're going to come back to the gym and I'm going to tell you about the fight."
This is a great story you're leading up to. It's very good when he's confronted by someone. It's fascinating. Go ahead.
All right, so now we go to this deli, neighborhood deli. One gopher goes in to order the sandwiches, and the other gopher is standing there next to the Rolls Royce is parked. Three little Afro-American kids, 8 years old maybe, come running down the hill. "Joe Frazier, Joe Frazier." He goes wild. He loves it. Go to his car. Bring in the autographed pictures. I want these kids to have my pictures. Now he hands the pictures out. "What are you kids doing on the show? Why aren't you in school?" "It's lunchtime, Joe." "Oh, yeah, I never thought about that." "Okay." Now one kid says to him, "My daddy says Muhammad Ali was drugged." Joe, who's a very dark man, I swear, began to turn white. He was so angry. He gets down at face level with the kid. I thought he was going to shove him or something. And he said, "Listen, You go back home and you tell your daddy he's absolutely right. He was right. I drug him with a left hook. The kids run away in terror, right? Joe says to me, and I'll never forget his words, and this is the real story of Joe Frazier. No matter what happened the rest of his life, this is the story. He says to me, what I supposed to do? You told me you saw the tape. You told me you saw it more than once. What the hell I supposed to do to make people believe what happened? All right, so we get back to the gym. Very emotional moment. Now we're sitting down, and I said, well, I said, Allie always argues with me. 50 years he argued with me. I never talk in the ring. And I'm saying, you're so into the fight, and your mind
He
is
doesn't
so,
even know he's talking, huh?
yeah, he doesn't know it. No, he's into it. He was like Lombardi saying, I never said that right after the game when he was still in the game, right? So he says, no, no, no. He was telling me, I don't do it. Joe says, bullshit. He said, let me tell you something. He knows I'm beating him. He knows I'm beating him. Everybody in the corner has said, you're getting licked, son. You've got to knock him out. He comes out for the 15th. And what I saw on the tape was the old alley, which he could do somehow for 30 seconds. And the left hand going pop, pop, pop. The right course is coming. And he's yelling the following, according to Joe Frazier. And I take his word for it. Fool, fool, fall down, fool. You can't stand up. God has ordained I will be the heavyweight champion. You can't fight against God. And when he says that, according to Frazier, Joe slips a punch, throws the left hook, and says, well, God's going to get his ass whipped tonight. Bang, Ali's on the floor. That was any hope that he could win the fight ended with that knockdown. I mean, it made 10-8 round. So, and he says, so that's exactly what happened. And he said, and it's just bad. Well, before the second fight, they all said, I'm gonna get my title back, blah, blah, blah. But he didn't have the title because he had the misfortune to step in the ring against George Foreman. And what happened now is no mystery. Now that Foreman explained it to me, it's no mystery. I have always preached this, and I'm sure you have too. 3 words: styles make fights. It doesn't matter who they are. And Foreman said, you're always running your mouth. I still speak to him every other week. You're always running your mouth. He said, well, I'm going to tell you why you're right. He said, I could fight Ali 100 times. He's going to beat me 100 times. I could fight Frazier 100 times. He's going to get knocked out 100 times. And then they go fight each other, and it's life and death because styles make fights. Right. All right, so then they have the worst fight ever held in Madison Square Garden. Like I said, if you didn't know their names, you'd walk down. It was a terrible fight, plus terrible officiating. Frazier almost got knocked out in the first round. The bell rang too early. I mean, it was just atrocious. And then the pursuit race is on. He's got to find a way to get his revenge against Frazier. And Frazier's more than willing to oblige him. But it doesn't mean anything. He's got to get the title. So he goes to Africa. And I'm in Africa, and I go through the whole thing. I mean, it's absolutely priceless. But I will tell you a thing about leading up to the African fight.
Yeah, this is the fight between Ali and George Foreman in Zaire that was set amidst an amazing.
It's for the fight because of the satellite. Because of the satellite. It's at 4 a.m. there. We are about 5 miles from the spot where the famous Dr. Livingston, I presume, was uttered by the American the newspaper guy sent out to fight him in Africa. Okay, I mean, for me as a writer, I don't care. I almost don't care about the fight because there's so much in Africa to write about. Ali Boumaier, Ali kill him. Ali, I go to the gym 4 or 5 days before. Now, Ali is Foreman's living downtown at the Omni Hotel. Downtown is a misnomer, but that's what they call their one stoplight. So Kinshasa. But Ali is out at a military compound called Anselli, and the gym is there. Go to the gym, and Ali does his workout, and he's walking around the ring in a white bathrobe, holding the microphone, and he's saying, George Foreman, George Foreman. He said, do you see the dog that George Foreman brought with him? You know, I'm told that the people who persecuted you, the Belgians, Ali called them Belgiums. He couldn't say Belgians. The Belgiums, they set dogs on you. Do you know the dog he brought here was a Belgian Shepherd?
Right.
He is a white man. Hey, Ali, boom, my head. Okay, so now,
Yeah, that was an interesting. What you just told the story there is an interesting part about the fact that Ali, in that fight, as well as the third fight with Frazier in Manila, Ali managed to find a way to make these fights almost home games for him, didn't he? Because he had a facile mind that could figure out a way to get the people on his side.
anywhere he went was a home game. Anywhere he went. Jimmy Young, a very skillful fighter, resorts to sticking his head out of the ropes, which the official, I don't know who he was, that's an automatic knockdown. Never counted, so never got was in danger there. Um, and he always turned the. In fact, now that when they get to Manila, well, I got to tell you one quick story. Everybody said he couldn't win, right,
Against Foreman.
against Foreman.
Yeah.
So I go to Deer Lake with the late Jerry Lisker, rest in peace. He was the sports editor then of the New York Post. And we're going to go see Ali. Ali's going to leave. Ali's going to leave like in a week, and we're going to leave in 3 weeks for Africa for the fight. So I swear, he had eyes in the back of his head. He must have. He's hitting a heavy bag, right? We're in the doorway. We're facing his back. He knows we're there. And he's going, I'll knock that sucker out. Bang. He's going to go down. Bang, bang, bang. And I'm looking, I said, Jerry, you realize Ali had traumatic arthritis in his both hands. Most people didn't know it. He hadn't knocked anybody out for a long time, if you go back and look at the record. Gene Kilroy, who was really his aide de camp there, now lives in Vegas. Kilroy says, we got to do something about your hands. Pacheco is sticking needles in his hand. Kilroy takes him, I think it's a Hanem, I don't know the name of the hospital in Philadelphia, to a specialist. And the guy says, all right, Muhammad, listen, no more needles. Anybody comes to you with a needle, you're a fighter, knock them down. No more needles. Here's what's going to be. You're going to soak your hands in hot paraffin as many times a day as you can stand it. We ain't going to cure your hands, but I guarantee you'll be able to throw those hands with authority when you go to the fight. And the reason I believe it is when my hands went bad, I did the same thing because I knew that and my hands are pretty good today. I wouldn't want to have to hit you with it, but they're pretty good. Okay.
Well, I don't want you to hit me because you have a good right hand.
Okay. So now, bang, 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 and all of a sudden, oh, hi, guys, fellas. You always say, fella, hi, fellas. I look at, and we know, because I've told Jerry Lisker about their hands. He hasn't hit a heavy bag in a year and a half or two. And now he's kicking the crap out of it. And so we leave the gym finally. Jerry says, well, who are you going to pick in this thing? I said, I don't have to wait till I get there. I'm going to pick Muhammad by a knockout. And he said, how can you say that? I said, how can I say that? I remember a long, long time ago when in his career, he said to me, if I say a mosquito can pull a plow, don't argue, hitch him up. And I'm going to hitch my prediction to what we just saw. And that's the way it ended, the exact same way. I got to tell you a little sidebar to that fight also, that Lisker was working for the London Sun then too. And he's going to dictate the fight live. And the night before, and everything was wrong in Zaire. Everything happened wrong in Zaire. We get to the morning of the fight. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going down to the arena. It was an old crumbling soccer field. And he said, well, why would you go now? I said, because I'd like to know if there's a little thing there like a table that I may be able to type on. I'd like to know. They have screwed up everything. We tried to send a column the other day. Oh, all the telexes are down. We have to send for a technician. And you know what the technician did when he got out there? He plugged them all in. So this is how primitive it was, all right? So now I'm listening to Lisker sitting next to me. I said, Jerry, what are you going to do with that phone? He said, well, I'm going to phone it to London because it's too short. Jerry, trust me, I don't know where it's going, but whatever you say into that phone is not going out of Kinshasa's eye ear. He says, oh no, I got watch. And he dials the number. Somebody answers in Lingala, hello. And he says, see, puts it down. I said, ain't gonna work. I said, tell you what, Jerry, I'll give you odds, $100 to $10. If that phone works properly, I will buy you dinner at 21 in New York. And if it doesn't, all you got to do is take me to McDonald's. We make the bet. He's coming down the, they're coming down the aisle. Listeners, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. He's wearing African garb. I don't know why he's, and blah, 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 boom. Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Fighters are in the ring. Ali is jawing at him. He must be trying to get into his head. Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Finally comes the fateful round. He happens to look up and he says, he's going down. He's going down. Can you hear me? And the Belgian technician across the ring says, yes, I can hear you. Jerry was on the San Jose boxing team. And that fight was better than Ali for it. So anyway.
Well, a Belgian technician heard his entire call of the fight, so that was good.
I said, good job, Jerry. You got that call about 20 feet from where we're sitting to where he's sitting. Anyway, all right, we go. Now he's going to fight. He goes to he fights Bugner, and it's no fight. It's horrible. And it's 3 days before the fight, and he said, this is my last fight, fellas. That was at right 10 in the morning. 1 o'clock, he says, well, I've decided I'd like to have one more go around and fight someone else, blah, blah, blah. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Dave Anderson from the Times and I are walking down the hall, and we hear this voice, can't fight. He can't fight. He's an old man. He's an old man. Joe Frazier, I'm coming for your ass. We walk into the room, we said, we thought you retired. He said, oh, I was just trying to sell tickets, you know. Yeah. He said, but look at him. I'll knock him out. As soon as he steps in the ring. We got to go back for the third time. And then we got to kill stories and write again with a 13-hour time difference. Okay. He beats him, no problem. He beats Bugner, no problem. Now we're in Manila, okay? Just before they announced the press conference to announce the fight in New York, they're walking down, Ali and 1,000 people are walking down 8th Avenue. And they come to one of these cheap stores, right? And they go in the store and he sees a gorilla doll. And he picks it up and that's how it starts. Boom, 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 boom. He's punching the doll. It's going to be a thriller in Manila. It's a killer when I meet the gorilla, you know. Okay, so it was, and Joe really takes it to heart.
Let me stop you there and ask you, because I want to, you've talked about this and alluded to it, and it's a topic that is fascinating to me and always has been. And you knew both men very well, and I spent a lot of time with Joe Frazier in the last 10 or 12 years of his life doing events with him, etc. The dynamic between these two men was so interesting. Did Ali ever truly understand? Did he care that while he was promoting fights, the man who he once called a close friend was so hurt by what he did?
Never. I'll tell you.
He didn't know it or he didn't care?
No, but I'm going to go ahead of the fight to answer your question.
Okay, go ahead.
We'll be in Manila, but it's over, okay?
Okay.
Joe, 25 years later, I write a perspective on that fight called Then and Now. The then, I tell how they chose the referee, Sonny Padilla, how both sides didn't want him. He's too small to break these big, heavy men and blah, blah, blah. And then they have the rules meeting and the head of the commission sits down. He's wearing a uniform, of course, pulls out a 45 and puts it on the table. And he says, I'm thinking there will be a Filipino referee. No one's arguing. They don't mind arguing with him, but they ain't going to argue with the 45, right? In comes the referee. He's the tallest Filipino I have ever seen outside of Roman Gabriel. Right. And I think this guy's going to have no trouble. And that night, he was the first guy to stop Ali put his hand behind his neck
Right.
and said, "You cannot pull his head down to hit him." And when I say break, he says to Frazier, during the fight, "You will break." And that fight was a very well conducted fight. It absolutely was the greatest fight I ever saw in terms of
Yeah.
physicality. Okay, so now they're getting ready to, and I know it's Ali, it's going to be a circus no matter what. We pull up to the hotel in Manila, our hotel. I get out, and there is a Filipino in tails and a top hat and a Bible in one arm. And he's saying, "I spoke to God last night. And God tells me Joe Frazier cannot lose, will not lose this fight." And I said to Lister, who was with me, "Go up there and ask him if he'll give me 8-5. I'm taking Ali." So, all right, now we get ready for, and all kinds of things happen during the fight. And he's mad. Well, fast forward ahead for 1 second, because I don't want to forget to tell you this. 25 years later, I do the perspective. So I said to Padilla, "What did you think when you got the referee's job? What do you think now that you've refereed at 25?" Joe and for everybody, promoters, I spoke to everybody. So I'm on the phone with Ali to do this perspective. And I said, I got to tell you something. Maybe you don't know this. Marvis Frazier, who was then maybe 13 years old, comes home crying from school. "Daddy, they take me, my father is a gorilla. My father's a gorilla." Joe never forgot that. Never. And it burned in his mind. His kids were crying over Ali, what Ali said. And so when I did the perspective, he said to me, "Well, Jerry," he said, "I was just trying to sell tickets for the fight. That wasn't personal." I said, "It was a theater fight Monday night. Nobody needed to sell any tickets for that fight. You couldn't get near a theater. It was such a big thing. Nobody." So I will tell you what my father told me, Muhammad. Never bullshit a bullshitter. I know you didn't have to do it. He said, "Well, I never thought about it. But I tell you what, are you going to speak to Joe?" I said, "This phone will still be warm. As soon as I hang up, I got Joe on the phone." He said, "Well, I want you to tell him I didn't want to hurt his kids. I really didn't want to hurt his kids. Tell him I'm really sorry for that." All right. Now I call Frazier. He said, "So you spoke to him?" It was him, but he never seen. I'm surprised. He might have said Clay, and I said, "Yeah, I just got off the phone with him." "Repeat that." I said, "Well, he said to me, tell him I'm really sorry if I hurt his kids. That was not my intent. I'm just trying to sell tickets." He said, "That's what he said." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You go back, call him back and tell him to take his apology and shove it straight up his ass." And that's why I know all of the ceremonial handshakes that followed through the years didn't mean anything to Joe whatsoever. And I remember at the boxing, and he wouldn't let it go. I remember I got some bullshit award at the boxing writers dinner, and Joe is sitting at the table next to me, and he leans over as it's starting, and he says to me, "You see Ali? You hear Ali speak? You see me? You hear me speak?" So really, who got the best of this thing? And he took satisfaction. He's the only, and he's not a mean man. He is a very gentle man, and yet he took satisfaction in Ali's pain because the thing cut him so deeply. Anyway, we'll go back to the fight, right? Now all of the lies have been told, everything else. They're in the ring for the introduction. Ali's waving, the Indian in the corner, Muhammad Ali, and the boos are thunderous. And Ali puts his glove in front of his eye and goes, "Oh," like he's crying, right? And I realized, largest Christian country in Asia. In a civil war with Muslims in the south part of the country, you bet that they were going to cheer Joe Frazier and they were going to boo Muhammad Ali. Well, before this fight, I was under the impression that if he fell down and had to tie his shoe with his right hand, Joe couldn't do it. I never saw him throw a right hand that meant a damn thing, right? Eddie Futch, who now is a trainer and manager, says he hires George Benton, great middleweight fighter. Okay, he's the assistant. He says, "Georgie, we got 3 months before this fight. You're going to teach Joe to throw a right hand. I don't care if it misses. I don't care if it doesn't hurt him. I want Ali to see that right hand because I know he's thinking, I'm fighting a left-handed fighter. So the fight starts. In the beginning of the fight, Joe almost gets knocked out. Several rounds into it, Frazier hits him with the right hand. Ali, who never speaks in the ring, and says, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You're an old man. You can't throw a right hand. You're an old man." And he says, "Ask George Benton." Bing, and he hits him again with the right hand. Ali had to think that over. So now the tide is, it's like a Wall Street graph. No knockdowns in the entire fight, and you're on the edge of your seat. Early rounds to Ali. Joe hits him with the right hand. Ali pauses for that. Joe is now taking control.
Right.
And it goes up and down until a strange thing happens. Not so strange when you think of it. Because I don't think that was ever settled who was the better fighter. Each guy always made himself, the other guy, better. I mean, the other guy had to be better to stay in the ring with each guy.
Right.
And better than they really truly were, probably. Anyway, it's now somewhere between the 12th and the 14th. I don't remember, but it was right around there. Around the 11th or 12th, Futch looks at the eyes and he says, "Son, you're going to have to straighten up." You know, he fought totally out of a crouch his whole life. You're going to have to straighten up. You don't see what you're trying to hit. And when he straightened up, that was curtains, because that left jab kept coming, bang, 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 and the eye kept closing more and more and more. And now we're into the 12th to 13th round. Frazier is standing in front of Ali. His arms are dangling at his sides. His legs are quivering like wet spaghetti. All Ali has to do is walk a foot and a half and tap him. Fight's going to be over. Ali could not walk that foot and a half. That's what happened. These guys gave up their souls in that fight. And at the end of it, of course, when they cut the gloves off over Joe's, and you know something, my scorecard, like I say, it's the only one I count. Ali's ahead by a point. If Frazier, who has the potential, knocks him down in the 15th round, he's going to win the fight with a 10-8.
Yeah, it was a very, very, very close fight.
Yep. And so I'm thinking if they hadn't cut the gloves off, maybe. But when Futch said, "Son, your eyes are too valuable. We're not going to do this. I don't care what you think." Ali, meanwhile, is gasping for air on the other stool. Dundee, who's paying no attention to Ali, is looking at Frazier. The gloves have been cut off. "It's over. It's over. It's over," he says. Ali gets up, goes about 8 feet, collapses in the middle of the ring. Gene Kilroy, a good friend of his and a great friend of mine, will argue about that. Because people were jumping in the ring, that's why he went there. But he had no breath left. I mean, it was really, and it was. So I remember now. Up the aisle comes Ali, being supported. I'm sitting next to Lister and Dave Anderson, and he leans over into the press section, and he says, "Fellas, that's the closest thing you'll ever see to death." And I say to Anderson, "I don't want to get any closer. That's enough of death I've seen tonight."
That's
By
for
the
sure.
I was saying, send them both home. Well, now I got to write this after I've seen the greatest fight I've ever seen. And I got about half an hour to write a column, not who had the fight, but a column about what. So I sit down, I'll never forget. I will never forget my lead. I was very proud of it. Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali did not fight for the WBC championship last night. They did not fight for the championship of the whole planet Earth last night. They fought in the middle of the ring without clinches on a melting ice floe. And they could have fought in a phone booth to see who was the champion. Joe Frazier am I the champion of Ali, or is Ali the champion of me? And as far as I'm concerned, after the 3 fights, it was never settled.
Very well put. And you know, that saga for boxing fans remains one of the most important in their lives. There's no question about that, even as fans. You, in the book, you write about this whole era, and you write about a lot of the great champions. Joe Frazier and Ali, Larry Holmes. You talk about his fight with Kenny Norton and Jerry Cooney and Michael Spinks. You talk about Tyson Holyfield. And in the book, you talk about the different flavor of society as things were happening. And one of the poignant parts of the book, I thought, was your description of Larry Holmes and Jerry Cooney as they both navigated through what was a kind of a shameless and totally inappropriate promotion of that fight by Cooney's two managers and Don King, in which they very much used racial tensions to kind of build the fight in terms of making money. And to this day, both men are aware of that. And now Jerry Cooney and Larry Holmes, are friends. They like each other. I've been around them many times. But at the time, it was tough for those two men to deal with, wasn't it?
I'm sitting in Larry Holmes' living room in Eastern Pennsylvania, fireplace, winter. This is well before the fight, but signed though. And now Rappaport, who is the biggest mouth on the other corner, is yakking about whites and this and that and the blacks. And of course, King is king. And I said, so what about this? You got to have a promoter. You got to have an opponent. He's got to have a manager. You can't avoid any of this thing. But how do you really feel deep down? And I'll never forget it. He points to the mantelpiece of his fireplace. He says, you see all those white kids up there? They're my nieces and nephews. How can I be a racist? Okay, that's number one. Cooney said, I'm not in camp. Cooney was really one of the most honest fighters I ever had to interview, most honest athletes I ever had to interview in my life. He's always told it like it was. He could have been wrong, like he thinks he should have won the fight, that he beat the count. But that, nevertheless, Victor Valley, who may not have been the world's greatest trainer, but he was the world's greatest protector, and he didn't want Jerry to take any more. I remember him telling me about how, a lot of people don't know this. He did not want to be a fighter. Right. Cooney did not want to be a fighter. His father used to make him run at 5:30 in the morning through the streets of that town in Long Island where he was from. And then he'd have to go to school, and then he'd have to take 2 trains to get to the gym in Manhattan. He'd have to train, he'd have to come back, and all of this stuff. And the father was just, sometimes he said, I was so exhausted. I was a kid. I wasn't even an amateur yet, really. And I'm sitting on the side of the curb, and my father come up and he rapped me in the mouth, slapped me backhanded, get up, run, run, run. And that was tough for him. And he survived a lot of things that part of his youth was taken from him. I don't know whether he would tell you that, but that's the way I interpret what he told me. I never spoke to the father. I spoke to the brother, though, and a girlfriend, and it seemed to all fit together in that pattern. And I remember he could not fathom the idea. In fact, he said to me about Rappaport, he said, I try not to listen to those guys. I don't want to hear them. I can fight. I can be. Well, what he didn't know is if he had one punch left after that fight that night, he should have 2 punches he needed. Really one was Rappaport. Should have thrown it at Rappaport because they prevented Cooney. And I believe this in my heart. I've seen a lot of fighters and a lot of fights. They prevented him from becoming what Jerry Cooney could become. They gave him washed up fighters to fight. Guys who had big knockout records, but they couldn't stand up anymore. And so he couldn't learn. You know what Joe Frazier told me once was the most valuable fight he ever had in his life? That was Scrap Iron Jones. What was his name? I think it was Johnson. Scrap Iron, it was his name.
Yeah, Scrap Iron Johnson.
Yeah, that was, why did they make the fight? He was a well-traveled fighter. He knew every trick in the book, and he couldn't punch his way out of a paper bag. Right. So they knew Joe could win the fight, but Joe was going to have a lot of problems. And Yancy Durham said, that's what I want to see.
Yeah.
So, Joe told me later it was the most valuable fight. He went to school in that. and he took
Yeah,
it.
they never did that with Jerry Cooney. They never really gave him that.
That's what I'm trying. They never gave him anybody who could fight. Really, I mean, it was just the way it was. And one thing that may have misled Cooney in a little bit in the fact that he could have won the fight. Larry Holmes had an obsession about his boxing shoes. Wear the shoes. I can't train without the shoes. Got to have the shoes. Then he goes out and buys a brand new pair of shoes to look good, and he gets blisters on the bottom of his feet. And if you watch the tape, that's when it suddenly becomes a jabbing match for him until he got him in trouble, and then he puts him away.
Yeah. You tell a story, and this might be the best way to me, it kind of sums up this whole era. You tell this story in the book about after the Tyson Holyfield ear biting incident. You wrote your story, you did everything that you were supposed to do, and of course while you were doing all that, craziness was ensuing in the casino, and there were gunshots, and it was a madhouse scene, and the casino was kind of completely drained of people at that point.
They threw everybody out.
Yes, you came out to see this scene of a casino that never is like this. And I always thought that when you wrote that in the book, that it was kind of a metaphor for this whole era ending. It was kind of the end of that part of the heavyweight story.
Musicians would say it put the coda on the golden era. And I tell you, I'll never forget the mob pushing in there. I finally get out and I get into the casino and I don't hear anything. Oh, there's no conversation. The dice tables are empty. There's no, but for the only time in my life, every single slot machine in the MGM Grand is silent. And I can't believe it. And I look up and this guy's coming toward me and he's got his name here. He said, "Sir, you'll have to leave the casino." I said, "Well, I'm living here. I'm going to go to my room." "Oh no, I'm living here." Guy says, "Well, then go to your room." I said, "What are you, my father? Go to my room." I said, "Let me see the name on that thing, because your boss is going to love what I write about the MGM tomorrow with your name in it." The guy said, "Forget I saw you," and walks away. But that was the only sound in the casino was his voice. I mean, it was really, like I say, it was requiem for a golden era. That's what it was. And it was a perfect, it's not an exclamation point, that's too loud. It's like at the end of a concerto, the coda, where the piano, it's the last thing you hear of the violin, and it drifts off. And the whole era drifted off. Remember, in the beginning of the book, there's a chapter called Tough Guys Have Rules.
Right.
And some guy, I don't remember who it was now, that wrote the book 4 years ago, but it might have been a Genovese. I know it's Friday night, because on Saturday night, the mafia osos are with their wives. On Friday night, they're with the Gomeris. And he's got this girl, he takes her on a date. I think they're at the Copa, and he sees a table with Willie Pep and two other champions sitting at the table. "Come on, guys, you're going to sit at my table. Everything's on me, on me, on me." They come over, of course, they come over. And listen, my girl, ain't she pretty? Ain't she pretty? You're all going to dance with her. And Willie Pep says, "I ain't going to dance with her." Now that's like a death warrant. I mean, you're insulting his taste in women. You weigh 118 pounds. What chance are you going to have? They're not going to offer to box you, And he says, "My girl's not pretty enough for you." And Willie says, "Look, we got rules. Tough guys don't dance." And it was the only logical explanation, because every mafioso wanted to be thought of as a tough guy. And if Willie said it, you don't have to dance.
That's great. The book, Once There Were Giants, is a terrific read. I read it again before second reading before this interview, and it was just as vibrant as the first time I looked at it. And for anybody that is either too young to remember all that period or wants to relive that part of boxing history, this is a must-read, and now re-released in paperback. And Jerry, I very much appreciate you taking time to visit with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. All those memories I had a sort of a tempestuous youth, which I'm not particularly proud of, but all those memories erased that because they're the good memories.
That's for sure. Well, you've gotten to cover not just that, of course, for people that know your history as a great writer. You've covered every major sporting event that matters in all these decades, and you've been the voice of for us and telling us all about those events. So I appreciate it, and I know the book will gain many new readers now in this re-release. Take care.
Well, thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
All right. So that was Jerry Izenberg telling, I think, some extraordinary stories. The book itself is a great read, so I strongly urge you to get a copy of it. Once There Were Giants is the title of it, and I just think that era was so wonderful in the heavyweight division. He's done a great job of chronicling it. So I urge you to take a look at it. And we, I believe, Trip Mitchell, have a few more questions.
We do. Mike Hills asks, who was your biggest surefire tip for the top that did not make it? Also, do you think that Wilder will eventually focus on his career again and win another world title?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'll mention a couple of fighters that I thought and they had good careers, but didn't quite become the superstars that would have been anticipated. Bernard Taylor was a fighter from Knoxville, Tennessee, who I announced many of his fights. Just as fast and as skilled and as good as you can imagine. He had a terrific career, did not win a world title, but he didn't get to the place that everyone thought he would get to. He just looked like he was the whole package and he didn't quite get there. The other one, a man who was named at the 1976 Olympics with all those great fighters, Sugar Ray Leonard, the Spinks brothers, and other great fighters on the U.S. team. Who was named the fighter of the tournament? Howard Davis, who won the lightweight title and would go on to have a fantastic, good professional career, but not really reach the heights that everyone expected him to reach. He suffered losses and made some major fights and just never got to the superstardom that people thought he would. So those are two fighters that I just thought would achieve a little bit more. Also on that, a fighter of lesser fame, Clint Jackson, who did we had on our Showtime or ESPN show a lot, was a phenomenal amateur. He didn't quite get to the promised land as a professional either. Now, as to the Deontay Wilder part of that question, Deontay Wilder's 35 years of age, coming off that loss to Fury. Clearly, he believes, and at age 35, heavyweights are, that's not considered an old age for heavyweights. You think of them having a couple more good years left in them at that age often, though certainly he's coming off a tough loss. I'm sure we'll see Deontay Wilder back in the ring. I hope within the next 5, 6, 7 months. That would be, ideal for his fans. Has he damaged his brand a little bit with some of the comments and things he's made after the Fury fight? I suspect yes, but that really has nothing to do with what happens in the ring, does it? And there are many, many Deontay Wilder fans out there, and they want to see him. He is an exciting figure in the heavyweight division. And it would be good for the sport if he comes back and is a factor in the heavyweight division, and I fully expect that to happen.
Okay, and then we have a very serious question on the culinary side of things. Rich Murata asks, has Barry Tompkins ever eaten at a restaurant where the entree costs less than $30?
Yeah, so many people will know that Rich Murata is a fine boxing commentator. He's been a terrific boxing commentator for decades, contemporary of mine, and he also is the man that founded the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame, and that is a very big achievement for him and a wonderful one, and many people in the boxing community owe Rich a big thank you for that. And Rich, for many years, worked with Barry Tompkins, as of course I did at ESPN. Barry works with me now at Showtime, but I don't get to call fights with him very often. But he does the Showbox series, of course. And Barry is known in boxing circles for his culinary acumen. And what that means is that when you eat with Barry, bring your credit card and make sure you have got a limit on it that's hefty, because he tends to pick restaurants that are expensive. And when Rich Murata sent that question on Twitter, I sent back, yeah. I said, somebody asked me about this, and I said, listen, Barry Tompkins could eat at a diner where the lowest cost entree is $30. He is very specific when it comes to dining. And here's the way that works. So, like when we did our ESPN Top Rank Boxing series we did it for 8 years. At the beginning of the series, we were joined by we'd have dinner, and there was, I'm going to say 5 or 6 members of the crew, both director, producer, other crew members that joined us. I'm going to say about 2 or 3 years into the series, it was down to me and Barry. Because as one of them pointed out, I don't really want to remortgage my home so I can eat dinner every week with you guys, because we were eating out weekly. That series was about 48 times a year. So Barry he's very specific when it comes to culinary things, and no, I don't think Barry has ever seen an entree on any menu in any restaurant he's seen that's less than $30. So now, somebody that has a lot of acumen in the boxing world is a man that does a wonderful, Tom Yankello, who does a wonderful website called World Class Boxing. And if you are interested in seeing some great instructional videos about boxing, and more than that, historical as well, because they educate you on what the style of famous fighters, but doing so through these videos that really explain the sport of boxing. They are extraordinary videos, and anybody can learn from them. And if you're a young amateur boxer or somebody that is aspiring to get into the sport, I really urge you to look at that. I wish, back in the Stone Age when I was fighting as an amateur, I would have, and there was no internet, right? I believe there was Pony Express, but I'm not sure if there was internet. I would have loved to have seen these videos, so it would have been fun to look at. I believe we have exhausted our questions, but
we have. And by the way, can someone go on YouTube and see some of your fights from the younger days?
No, they don't. I don't even have any video. It's funny. The only video I have even of anything is when I went back. I should actually try and find this. We should show it. I went back and boxed in a celebrity boxing tournament down in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm going to say I was in my mid-30s or so, mid to late 30s.
So 2 years ago.
I'd been on ESPN, and I went down there and I boxed in that. And I think a little video exists, so I have to find that, and we can put that up, and people can critique me and see how well I did. I still, it was many years after I'd actually boxed, but I did get myself in pretty good shape for it. And I boxed against this guy who was a former football player who was a news anchor down in Lake Charles. He played football at McNeese State. And he did outweigh me by about 35 pounds. So I did have that going against me. But he wore this. I didn't wear any headgear that was optional. You could. He wore this giant headgear that, sometimes you wear an extra big headgear when you spar. So there was a point in the fight where I was kind of bouncing right hands off his head. And I could tell I could have been hitting him with a bat. And he would not know that he was being hit. And not that I was ever, even my amateur days, known for power, mind you, but I came back to the corner, and my friend Phil Daly was there with his sons, Kirk, and Kirk looked at me and said, "Man, Al," he said, "you keep hitting this guy with right hands. I don't think it's getting through." I said, "No, it's not getting through." I said, "It's never going to get through." But anyway, it was a fun one. So I'm going to look for some video of that, and we can show people, and then they can give me a hard time. And now, Antonio Tarver once saw the video of me doing this fight, and he was complimentary to me. So he might have just been nice. He probably did that and then turned and winked at whoever he was talking to. Anyway, delightful visit today with Jerry Izenberg. And a reminder Next up on, we have David Benavides, who will be joining us next week, talking about his fight on March 13th. And then we're going to have our new friend Snoop Dogg, who is doing a new boxing series, and of course, which he's going to be commentating on, and a big part of promoting that. And we're going to be chatting with him about not just boxing, but all things Snoop Dogg. And in doing research for this this interview, though, you know about Snoop Dogg, but like everyone, you start looking back at things. The life he's lived is nothing short of extraordinary. So we'll have no lack of topics for sure to talk to him about. So my thanks to Tripp, of course, for co-hosting so well. And my thanks to the folks at Let's Do Something Productions for making this show possible. And also, very much, my thanks to Jerry Izenberg. If you get a chance, go get his book, Once There Were Giants. It's available on it's re-released, available on pre-sale on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. And also on April 27th, will in fact be fully released for sale. So we'll see you next time.